The Philadelphia Church of God presents the Trumpet Daily.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Trumpet Daily. Bias has always existed in journalism. A reporter's personal views will often influence the stories he decides to energetically pursue or to completely ignore. It also influences the way a reporter covers a subject, what gets stressed and re-emphasized, what gets suppressed and left out. Even an article that is purely factual can be terribly misleading if those facts are not given context. But why, over the past generation, have so many Western media outlets swung so far to the left? In 1992, even many journalists were surprised by the findings of a now famous Roper poll. It discovered that 89% of Washington News Bureau chiefs and correspondents voted for Bill Clinton, while only 7% voted for George Bush. Since that study, a number of books, articles, and websites have shed further light on the effect of this reality, that ideological bias does influence what gets news coverage, what is ignored, and how stories are reported. For the main message today, we've pieced together several excerpts from a lecture my father gave back in August before students at Armstrong College. In it, he talks about why major news organizations have taken such a radical turn to the left and why it's so critical for us to stay grounded in the truth. With that, we'll move into Gerald Fleury's August presentation delivered from Armstrong Auditorium.
I thought this was really interesting. The last great, let's say, real executive editor they had was a guy by the name of Abe Rosenthal. And here's what this book says. Along with the publisher, Arthur Oakes Schulzberger, and a group of skillful news executives, he put the paper back into the black. In the process, this was years ago, this team revolutionized the way the paper reported the news and set an example that transformed newspaper journalism in the rest of the country. Rosenthal retired from the executive editor position in 1986. Of course, that's the year that Mr. Armstrong died. And then the New York Times began to go down, down, down. And then he wrote a twice weekly column on the op-ed page until 1999. And you know why he stopped? Because the new publisher said, "You're not going to write for the New York Times anymore." But he'd probably sit there and tell you, "Hey, we haven't really changed." It's almost like what we heard from the WCG headquarters when all the changes were being made. They'd say, "Well, changes? What changes? What changes are you talking about?" Now they boast about them. They're liars. That's what it amounts to. They're liars. And you'd better be careful who you listen to. That was the reason they were having to really get their audience back was because of television coming on the scene, and they were getting all of the news junkies and people like that. So he expanded the paper from two sections to 4, and really made it what it became, the greatest newspaper in the world in many ways, and I think in almost every way except the fact that they were still liberal, but not anything like what they are today. But notice this. Now here's the difference in Rosenthal and the Arthur Schulzberger Jr., who is the publisher today. And here's what Rosenthal said. He said he's trying to keep the Times straight by battling what he saw as the ingrained left liberal tendencies of the newsroom, particularly the Washington Bureau. Now, why is that? Why do they always keep leaning left? Why is that? Well, it's because that's just natural. It's just natural to give in to lawlessness, which is really what they're talking about, and give in to human nature. Well, it's just going to go that way if you don't have somebody there jerking it back and putting it back on track if they get off track, like Mr. Armstrong did the church. But he said he scolded reporters and editors he thought were romanticizing the 60s counterculture, which he viewed as a destructive force. They certainly don't view it that way today. And even William Buckley, who owned the National Review, said that Abe Rosenthal was a great editor. So it shows you this man, he really was a powerful executive there at the Times. Abe would always say with some justice that you have to keep your hand on the tiller and steer to the right or it'll drift to the left. Now that's what will happen to you. You know that. If you don't get grounded and established in the faith, you're going to keep drifting left. You're going to, you want to be into some of that wonderful lawlessness in the world, you think, or you can think. And I don't think you do think that, or you wouldn't be here. But it's human nature we're talking about. It's human nature. And you'd better keep yourself rooted and grounded in this, young people, or you're going to begin to drift to the left, we'll say, or to lawlessness. Notice this article that was in the paper at the time of Rosenthal. He said this was about Woodstock. Reinhold had called Woodstock a symbol of national, cultural, and political awakening, extolling it as the culmination of a decade-long youth crusade for a freer style of life, for peace and for tolerance. Rosenthal did not see the story until the Saturday evening before it ran in the Sunday edition. Livid, he ordered it out of all subsequent editions. You know what Woodstock was? It was just one big orgy. And they had drugs and alcohol. It was a drunken, drug-infested orgy. That's all it was. This guy was romanticizing that. Now today, the publisher comes from that decade, or he agrees with that decade of the 60s and the 70s and all of that, and promotes it. Thinks, well, this is wonderful. It's free. And you have a wonderful lifestyle, and everybody loves each other, and all of that nonsense that is so destructive to a nation and literally brings it to its knees. It does the same to an individual or to a group of people. That's just the way it is. Arthur Schulzberger came on the scene. He wasn't a very good reporter. And they didn't think he would be able to do the job. Most people didn't. But before I get into that, let's go to Malachi 4 and verse 4. Now here, notice, if you're going to bring the family together, what do you have to do? First of all, you've got to get grounded in something. Remember you the law of Moses, my servant, the servant of God who gave the 10 Commandments, which I commanded it to him in Horeb for all Israel with the statutes and the judgments. Now, if you're going to do something really great, here's where you have to begin. Get grounded in this. Get grounded in it. Rooted in it. If you get rooted in something like this, you take these strong trees out there, these big, huge trees, they're really rooted in the ground and you can't uproot them. And it's the same with you spiritually if you get rooted in this. But notice, behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord. And he shall turn the heart of the fathers to the children, and the heart of the children to their fathers, lest I come and smite the earth with a curse. Now, Mr. Armstrong really did love children. He had his Chinese grandchildren, and he actually funded Liberty Bell Park, playground for children, little children in Jerusalem. And then he sponsored part of that ICCY for young people where the Arabs would get together with the Jews. And he realized that if we're ever going to turn this around, it's going to take a generation of teaching the young people to change this world. It's going to take a long time to get that turned around. But you have to change the children. It starts with the children. It starts with the young people. That's where it all really has to be established. But listen to Arthur Schulzberger. He really got firmly established. Schulzberger, he got firmly established in 1991, but he was really in there even before that and just shortly after Mr. Armstrong died. And it just kind of struck me as I was reading some of this that the timing of all this, well, what happened to the New York Times? What happened to these people? Well, Satan was cast down. That's what happened. That's what happened. Listen to this. He was a child of divorce at 5, Arthur Jr., the one who now runs the New York Times. A child of divorce at 5, grew up with a great deal of insecurity over his inheritance and felt a nagging coldness from his own father, who seemed to favor his cousin Stephen Golden, son of Punch's sister. Sent away to boarding school after grammar school, young Schulzberger returned to New York pretty quickly and acted on a long-standing desire to go live with his father and stepmother along with his half-sister and stepsister. Quote, I was 14 when I came to his Punch's house. Listen to this. In May 1975, Schulzberger Jr. married his girlfriend. As Edwin Diamond describes it in Behind the Times, the wedding was certainly a scene from a modern marriage. Standing with Arthur were 3 fathers. See where this guy is coming from? There were 3 fathers there. His mother had remarried twice after leaving her marriage to Punch, which is Punch Schulzberger, the father of Arthur. 2 mothers, 1 stepsister, 3 sisters, a half-brother, and an assortment of long-haired cousins. The bride, an avowed atheist and feminist, kept her maiden name. Now, again, this is what Mr. Armstrong is talking about. That's more deadly than a nuclear bomb because, well, look what this guy has done to the New York Times and to almost all of the media and to almost all of the political spectrum in this U.S. Look what he has done. Look at the destruction. He has been a son of perdition. And, well, you do feel sorry for him too, don't you? Who could survive such a family? Who could be strong in such a family? Who could be grounded in core values in such a family? Is it really worthwhile getting married and having your children and raising them and turning them to the Father and God the Father and building a strong family? Is that really worthwhile? Isn't that what we're about? That's what Malachi 4, verses 5 and 6 is all about. They said he did not seem to have the managerial skills, nor did he have exceptional writing abilities. Schulzberger was proud to the point of vanity to be a part of the 60s and its emancipatory spirit, that is Woodstock. He was really proud to be from that Woodstock decade where they had all the drugs and the alcohol and the sex and the orgies you can imagine. They had it all. Oh, that's such a free and a wonderful life. Well, is it? Look at the fruits of it. Look at the fruits of what these people are doing. And they lie and they cheat and you can't trust them. And they don't know what they're doing. It's time that they listen to God. This works every time. I guarantee you, every family that follows this is a beautiful family. Every one of them never fails. Never fails. I'll just read you about what he did to the great editor, Abe Rosenthal. He said years later in 1999, when he had been firmly established as publisher since 1991, Schulzberger finally, but he'd been on the scene before that, but he really got established in 1991. Schulzberger finally got his delayed revenge on Rosenthal when he called the older man into his office to tell him that he should no longer be writing his op-ed column. "It's time," Schulzberger said, giving little other explanation. After having given his life to the paper, Rosenthal felt betrayed and heartbroken. "I didn't expect it at all," he reportedly told his friend William F. Buckley. So Punch Schulberger said he put the grooming of his son into the hands of Walter Matson, a top executive who felt strongly that Arthur Jr. needed to be seen as having earned his spurs, as they say. And he said almost from day one, Arthur Jr. demonstrated a management style drastically different from his father's. Well, what do you know? His heart wasn't turned to his father, who was a great publisher in many ways. But he didn't want to do it the way his father did it. You see why God says you'd better turn the hearts of the children to the fathers? If you don't, they're going to betray you. They're going to betray your values. They're going to do a lot of that. They may do some of it anyhow. I mean, it's really kind of a battle sometimes, isn't it, with human nature? In the middle of the battle, his father had allowed strong news executives like Rosenthal virtually as much autonomy as they wanted. By contrast, Arthur Jr., the former reporter, although of mediocre accomplishment, was set on running both sides of the paper, business and editorial. I mean, he's a micromanager. This is the way the editorial is going to be. This is the way the business side is going to be. I'm running the show. And if you don't do it my way, hit the road. I saw a documentary where the New York Times had fired 100 of their people. I mean, they were all around crying, and they just seemed like the most loving people you've ever seen in your life. And they can rip other people apart and tear their lives apart and even get soldiers killed and all that. It doesn't faze them. They're so wrapped up in themselves. It's shocking how wrapped up in themselves they are. Now, we're here to teach you young people how to get your mind off yourself. You can't ever achieve anything unless you get wrapped up in what God is doing. Incidentally, I might just tell you a little bit about something. When I came into church, I was single, and I applied for college right away, and I was rejected. And the minister talked to me and said, well, look, what you need to do, get your mind in the work. And he didn't tell me I was selfish, but I was new in the church, but I knew what he was meant. And you just get your mind in the work. And here I was single, and I'd travel around to different cities, going where the single people were. And that's really, I think, about all I was. That was probably my top priority at the time. I just came into church. But he really kind of set me straight, because he said, look, get your heart in God's work, and all these things will come that you're interested in, like a wife, and like, well, even at college. I even got into college as a married student. But it only comes, young people, if you put the work first. Put your heart in the work, as Mr. Armstrong said. That's what you need to be doing. But here's the thing, here's what's happening in the news today. You really need a really strong establishment to be able to cover something, let's say, even like Watergate or investigative reporting or a war. But you've got today just mostly bloggers. And those guys they just want to give you their agenda, and they have an agenda. That's basically what it's all about. And so all that technology gives you information that's really dumbed down. They're not that interested in getting some really good analysis of the news. And they're not that interested in supporting people where they can really have time to sit and think it through. They just want information. Give us more information. That's all we need. And they're lost in that information. It's meaningless. Nobody understands it. But what can you do? Well, you can do what Mr. Armstrong did in Malachi 2 and verse 5. Can we follow his example? Here's true leadership. And this is a college for leaders. We want you to lead. We want you to step out and lead. And there are all kinds of opportunities for you to do that. Verse 5, here's what God said about Mr. Armstrong. My covenant was with him of life and peace, and I gave them to him for the fear wherewith he feared me, and was afraid before my name. He feared God. Well, is that a good way to live? Is that a healthy way to live? He feared God. And God was able to use him and direct him in the right path everywhere he went. He was afraid to disobey God because he knew what it would do. And what does God do with that man that was so fearful of him? Well, he established 3 colleges, established just a magnificent work all over this world, met more world leaders than anybody in his time in their offices. Well, this man really was blessed by God, wasn't he? And he had all kinds of money coming in to do the work, and he feared God. He trembled before God's word. And that's what we hope that you young people will be doing. God says, my covenant was with him. Now, if you want to look at an example to follow, well, there it is. God made his covenant with that man. This was God's messenger. And what did he do as a result of that? Verse 6, the law of truth was in his mouth, and in lawlessness, it should read, was not found in his lips. He walked with me in peace and equity, and did turn many away from lawlessness. Now that is something that God loves, and God really loved Levi's example of turning people away from lawlessness and to God. What a wonderful life that man lived. That is a true leader. Can you turn people, you young people, by your example, can you turn people away from lawlessness? Can you help them get grounded in God's truth and in faith? Because that's why you're here, to help get this message out to the whole world. Can you love this world enough? Even Arthur Schulzberger, who, well, we understand why he's doing that, don't we? Can you relish the idea of giving God's truth to him? Into this poor, deceived, confused, misguided world. You can see that same scripture or the same approach over in Daniel 12 in verse 3, where it says, and they that be wise shall shine as the brightness of the firmament, and they that turn many to righteousness as the stars forever and ever. Turn many to righteousness. Can you do that? Are you going to be the kind of leader that will actually let God use you to turn many to righteousness? But I think there's something we've overlooked here. I think we just think, well, he's talking about the work doing that, getting the message out there. Well, what about your example? What about your own life? Will it turn people to God? Will it turn people to righteousness? Is that really an important factor in your life? Well, that's what this college is all about. And Mr. Armstrong certainly did that. Turn many to righteousness. That's what we're here to do. We're heading into the great and dreadful day of the Lord. It's a dreadful time. People are going to just go crazy. It's so bad, so horrifying. And finally, they will begin to get to know God and say, well, I see this way I've been living is terribly wrong, and God says they're going to be ashamed. And they should be. And they're going to be ashamed. Here we have you young people. You have an opportunity, let's say, even when the PYC is here. And you have all these young people out there, and you get to counsel them and guide them, and you get to help turn the hearts of the children to the fathers. You get to help do that. You get to help even now to turn people to God and teach them this wonderful way of life, and the only way of life that has ever worked. The only one. And here you have an opportunity to do this, and you'll never have another opportunity like it. Never, ever have another opportunity like it. You are blessed. And I tell you, I went to college as a married student, and I knew how blessed I was. I think I did know that. I was old enough to know that. What am I doing here? Why was I honored so, I thought, to be going to Ambassador College? And I was nervous because I really thought, wow, this is special going to Ambassador College. And I thank God for that. Maybe not enough at that time, but I certainly knew that was a terrific opportunity for me. Wonderful opportunity for me to be able to go there.
For more information on today's subject, call the number on your screen and ask for this new article from the Trumpet Daily reprint series, The Deadly Left-Wing Media. This article recounts some shameful British history from the 1930s, leading up to the outbreak of World War II. At the time, Winston Churchill was doing everything possible to warn and to save his country and the world from Adolf Hitler. The world, as you know, came dangerously close to being enslaved by Nazi Germany. And yet, at the very same time, Churchill was crying out, the most powerful broadcasting organization in the world, the BBC, was actively working to suppress his warning. To learn more, request The Deadly Left-Wing Media. There's no cost or obligation. The cost for this brochure has already been covered. Now, when you call, also ask for a complimentary copy of this booklet, Winston S. Churchill, The Watchman. In this booklet, you'll not only read about that shameful resistance Churchill faced from his own people when trying to warn the world, you'll also see how Churchill's message is being scorned by the West today. Call the operators now and request Winston S. Churchill, The Watchman. If you'd like to place your order online, just visit thetrumpetdaily.com, and you can also view these programs at the website. That's thetrumpetdaily.com. Thank you for watching. We'll see you again tomorrow.